Codruța, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me.
I'm really appreciative of you taking the time to speak to me after such a tiring week. I guess my first question is this. How much of a shock is this election result? I mean, George Simion, the far right candidate, he got like twice the share of Nicușor Dan in the first round of the election, 40-ish% compared to 21%. And now, a few weeks later, Dan manages to turn it around completely and beat his far right rival really quite decisively. How did he do it, and to what extent are you surprised by what just happened?
Okay, so first of all, it was a tiring 6 months, not weeks. But to go back to the results of the elections, I think Nicușor Dan managed to win by being very present and saying things that people were really curious about. So how will he solve the economical problems? Because Romania is now in such a sensitive economical moment. How will he deal with inegalities, with the society, which is very polarized, and we see two sides about as big, fighting each other right now. So people were also curious what was his solution about how to reconciliate these two parts of the society. And I think, and all the polls before showed that Romanians are in big percent supportive of the pro-European message, and Nicușor Dan was very clear and neat about that.
So how is it possible that before that, a far right candidate was leading?
Well, you would have to understand the informational space in Romania in order to understand how the far right candidate was on such a rise, because we've had years when all the major parties used to pay mainstream televisions and mainstream newspapers through advertising agencies, and they were spending this money on propaganda. But when you looked at the news, at the content that the televisions were putting on or the newspapers were writing about, you would not see the articles marked as publicity or propaganda. So actually, I think what happened in Romania for the past 3 to 4 years was that we consumed a lot of propaganda sold to us as news. And we didn't had that much of different opposition voices. And this was the environment that he exploded. And then we had Nicușor Dan, who came as an independent, but people knew him because he was already mayor of Bucharest for the last 5 years, and he ran again and won by far last year. And I think what he was able to do, he was able to show that he's more trustworthy than his opponent. I think this is where Simion lost, because he was not able to show people that he can be trusted with what he says. And I think it was even more complicated for him to do that because for the past 5 years, he used all the conspiracy theories that appeared during the COVID pandemic, and then he manifested the pro-Russian discourse, and it was the first time when this type of political agenda was addressed in the right way.
Yeah, I guess the thing I'm struggling to still understand is that, Dan was in the first round of this election. He was standing against Simion. They were both making these arguments in the first round. How is it possible that so much changed between round one and round two?
you know, they never actually met each other in the first round. There was no debate between the two of them. So the public would see them separately. You would see Nicușor Dan, and he was attacked by, I think, all the candidates in the first round. And then on the second round, we've had this week when they would call each other for a debate. And then the debate actually happened. And it was, I think, 3.5 to 4 hours long. It was a very long debate where you could see both of them in the same environment, answering the same questions, interacting with each other. And I think that was the major point where people changed their minds or decided they want to go vote. Because I think what Nicușor Dan did was he convinced a lot of people in Romania to go and vote. And that's a thing they haven't been doing for, I don't know, 10 or 20 years. But people felt it was a very important moment because they felt like we have to choose between a pro-Europe or a European path or a path that would lead back to corruption and the muddy years of the 1990s, which were not very nice for Romania. And also people perceived the pro-Russian agenda that George Simion is projecting sometimes.
I want to ask you about what happened online, because of course the world became very interested in what happens in Romanian politics online last November. So I want to ask about take one of this election, the one at the end of last year that got cancelled. You write this excellent newsletter called Misreport, which is about online disinformation. A couple of days after the election in November, the one that ended up being cancelled, you apologized to your readers. Why did you feel that you owed them an apology?
Because when we've started Misreport in 2020, just before the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, the mission that we wanted to take or to do with Misreport was informing a community about what happens in online disinformation, teaching them about tactics, about how they are being manipulated by algorithms of the social networks. And we felt we weren't able to do the mission we proposed ourselves. So we felt like, because we didn't see the rise of Călin Georgescu, even though we wrote about him several times, because we knew who he was and we knew what kind of mystical mambo jumbo he's projecting, but we never saw him coming on TikTok. And we felt like the right thing to do is apologizing to our audience because we were not able to tell them what's happening in real time.
But is the fact that you didn't see what was happening with Georgescu, is that because your own experience of the internet in terms of what your algorithms were serving you in terms of political content was completely different from the kind of people that were being targeted? Is that what was happening?
Yeah, I'm afraid that's what's been happening. And the TikTok algorithm is quite different than the Facebook one or the Instagram one. And once that algorithm understands that you enjoy a sort of information, his tendency will be to feed you nonstop with that, you know. And this is how you enter a bubble. And this is something that I think all of us should learn in a fast digital education kit. Because I think most of us, when we go online on social networks, we think that we're seeing what our friends are posting there or what the people that we're following are posting there. But actually what's happening is that we're being fed a sort of plate with things that, yeah, we are interested on a small part of that content, but a huge chunk of that content that reaches us is actually reaching us because of the algorithm. Was
So
designed.
was it not obvious at all from your own experience of the internet during that first campaign that something weird was
No,
happening?
no. From my experience, no. I had my daughter who was on TikTok, and at a certain point, he started showing me what she was seeing. Because at the beginning, she was like, "Who's this guy? Okay, interesting. Let's see what he's saying." And then she started showing me, and there were like, I don't know, hundreds of accounts posting sort of the same content. But it was Thursday before the first round, and I didn't perceived it as being able to change in such a way the results of the elections.
Because I guess
And
you see it on your
also,
daughter's phone, but how do you know that this is happening millions of times over? You
yeah,
don't know that, right?
you don't know. You don't know. Not on TikTok. There were certain kinds of ways you could see that on Facebook, but then Facebook bought that tool. It was called CrowdTangle, and they slowly shut it down. So now we don't have that. And it's actually very hard to understand right now for researchers how the deploy of content is being made and tailored on social networks. And there's also a lot of other different things. For instance, we've had this batch of Facebook pages who we were able to connect directly to our, and they were constantly paying Meta for political advertising, and many of their political advertising was actually propaganda or disinformation.
Yeah,
I
because
mean,
I wanted to ask you, I
plain
mean,
disinformation.
because I wanted to ask you when Romania finally held the rerun of the election this month, even though as a researcher you're only able to tell a limited amount about what people are seeing, did the online version of this election and the way it was being fought, did it feel different from the cancelled one? Had there been the
Yes,
same kind of stuff?
yes. It really felt different, and I can tell you why. Because even though we've noticed inauthentic behavior on the official accounts of some of the main candidates, none of them was able to gain such wide audiences like Călin Georgescu did. So, and TikTok said in a report that they erased like 27,000 accounts that were working directly to amplify Călin Georgescu. We haven't seen that magnitude this time. This time, I think we've identified networks with maximum 100 bots. And there are, I think, my colleagues at Funky Citizens had a report like this, and the colleagues at Expert Forum also monitored the content online. But we didn't see that rise in... There were like waves of people, or you would perceive them as people.
What else, in terms of lessons that Europe should learn from Romania's experience of all of this, what lessons do you think the rest of Europe should be learning from all of this? Are there reforms that you'd like to see?
I think the most important lesson, and I don't think we understand yet the most important lessons, but from what I can see right now, I think one of the most important things is that politicians have the responsibility to communicate consistent, verified data regarding the government and the public spending, and they need to be more transparent and more on point, because otherwise the information, because people need to understand what's happening. What is the government doing? Why is it doing it? Why it decided to do things like that? Because if people don't understand, they will look for the simple explanations. And that's what the populists do all around the world. They offer the simple, easiest explanations with no logic and no nothing, and people just buy them because they lose their ability to consume consistent data. And I think this is what any responsible government and party should do in the next years. Just communicate, be honest about what's happening, and offer complex and consistent data, because people need it. Another lesson that I've learned, and I hope that I'm not the only one who understood this, is that we need media literacy and digital education in school as soon as possible, starting from the kindergarten. I mean, the young people, and not only the young people need to understand when they go online, they need to understand what they find there. Because they go online and they imagine something, they imagine that they go online to see nice pictures with kitties, or they inform themselves on social networks. And social networks are not newspapers, and influencers are not journalists. People lie there, people mislead there, and they do that for money.
Do you think Romanians have come out of the experience of this election with a deeper understanding of that, the fact that they can be manipulated, or do you think ordinary people have still got that lesson to learn?
No, I think most Romanians understood that they are being manipulated, but not in the same way. Because, for example, the George Simion's fans and people who voted for him are now accusing the others of being brainwashed and manipulated by the system. And we look at them and say they are being manipulated by populist speech. And you see, actually, everyone feels he's being manipulated, or the others are being manipulated. I think we need a serious conversation on this. And I think all the European countries should watch out for this, because it's not happening just in Romania. It's happening everywhere. And actually, what I see is it's somehow that we don't want to understand the reality according to a few values like truth, like data, like what's real and what's not. And this is also, maybe we should start seeing more political theorists and philosophers on TV,
Codruța, thank you so much for joining me today. And I really hope some of those lessons learned actually get learned. Very useful. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.